Hey, Tiffany. I waved as I pulled up next to her as she hopped out of her car. I parked quickly and met her.
Hey, Sonia. Another week working at the mall. I will never understand why you'd want to do this. You're rich.
I laughed. There's more to life than being rich. I nudged her playfully. And besides, my parents are rich. I just enjoy helping people, and I want to make something of myself. By myself, you know? At this point, I didn't realize that a change of events was about to shift my entire life. Want to know what they are? Keep watching.
Hey, mystery guy alert.
Tiffany winked at me as she attended to a customer. Every Saturday, a cute guy walked into the store and looked around, but would never buy anything. However, today, he approached me.
Hi.
His dazzling blue eyes looked into mine. He scratched his head nervously. Hi, how can I help you? I smiled politely.
I know you don't know me, but...
He cleared his throat and spoke quickly.
Can I take you to the movies sometime?
Sure, why not? He told me his name was Dante and we exchanged numbers. Over the next few weeks, we spoke every day. He was funny and really easygoing. Eventually, we did go to the movies on a date. After the movies, we went on other dates. And after 3 months, we were officially a couple. One evening, as we watched a movie, I turned to Dante and asked, "What type of pizza should we bring to Tiffany's this weekend?"
Huh?
Dante looked at me confused. Saturday. Tiffany asked us to come over to watch a movie this weekend, and we said we'd bring a pizza.
Oh yeah, how about Hawaiian and pepperoni?
Sounds good. But this wasn't the only incident where I spoke with Dante and he seemed clueless. One time he forgot we made reservations for dinner. Another time he forgot Tiffany's name. But the final straw for me was when he ordered caramel popcorn with nuts at the movies when he knew that I was allergic to nuts. When we got back to the car after the movie, I turned to him. Dante, what's going on with you? I feel as though you're two different people sometimes. Dante lowered his eyes.
I'm so sorry, Sonia. I knew I should have told you sooner, but I was kind of embarrassed and I didn't want you to think I was a freak.
I held his hand. Why would I think you're a freak? Dante sighed heavily.
When I was 7 years old, I got into a car accident and I hit my head. Dad said I had amnesia for about 2 months before everything came back. Everyone thought I'd make a full recovery, but shortly after I regained my memory, some of my short-term memory gained gaps. So basically, sometimes I'd forget and other times I won't. I'd understand if you want to break things off and never want to speak with me again.
Dante, I'm so sorry you had to go through that. I pulled him close and kissed him. You're the only one I want. Dante smiled.
How about we go to my house for a bit before I drop you off?
I nodded. I had never been to Dante's house before. When we pulled up to the front gate, my eyes widened. The house was gorgeous. It looked like something from a Rich and Famous magazine. This is beautiful, I said as we drove up to the house. Once settled with a glass of wine, I asked, "So tell me about your family."
I'm not really close with my family. After Mom passed, we grew apart.
I squeezed his hand. I'm so sorry. Don't worry. Things usually work themselves out. Dante quickly changed the subject. We hung out for a few hours before he dropped me home. While at the mall, looking for an anniversary gift for my parents one afternoon, I saw Dante and was about to approach him when the guy he was talking to spun around. But then I felt my jaw drop. The guy looked exactly like Dante. I tilted my head. 2 of them? How? When Dante turned, I hid between the clothes racks outside a clothing store until Dante and the other guy walked away. I ran all the way to my car. After I cried a few minutes in my car, it dawned on me. That was probably why Dante didn't remember everything, because there were 2 of them. I mean, who does that? My sadness quickly turned to anger. If the guys want to play games, then play games we must. I turned on the engine and drove out of the mall parking lot. I went along with the twin charade. Over time, I was able to figure out which twin was which. I called them Dante 1 and Dante 2. Dante 1 had a small mole right above his eyebrow, and Dante 2 didn't. My plan to use them was only supposed to be for a few months, then I would tell them that I knew what they were up to. However, I realized after 3 months that Dante 1 was the only twin that came to meet me. Eventually, my revenge slipped away and I fell in love with Dante. I can't help who I fall in love with, can I? After 1 year, Dante 1 asked me to marry him, and I agreed. About 2 weeks before the wedding, I overheard Dante 1 on the phone, and my blood ran cold.
Listen, Chuck, once I marry this chick, I'll have all the money that I need.
I decided to hire a private investigator to dig up all the dirt on Dante 1 and his family. First off, Dante 1's name was Alexandro, and his brother's name was Aiden. They made money by swindling rich women. Mr. Finley, their father, lost his company about 7 years ago. Around the same time their mother got sick. Within a year, she passed away, and the boys blamed their father since he couldn't afford proper health care for her and abandoned him. Once their father re-established himself, the brothers tried to re-enter his life, but he cut them off completely and removed them from his will. Dante, too, was recently widowed. After 6 months of marriage, his wife passed away in her sleep. The family of the woman thought foul play was involved, but they could never prove it. Since then, Dante 2 had been married 4 more times, and Dante 1 was married 3 times before. All wives died the same. But, with their gambling addiction, the money was never enough. I knew it was time to end the charade. "Thanks for coming with me to tell Dante the wedding is off," I said, as I turned the key and walked into Dante's house.
I'd have it no other way. I'm ready for this.
Tiffany pulled out the rolling pin from her purse. Tiffany followed me to Dante's office. I pushed open the door and stepped into the office. Tiffany and I froze. There stood Dante 1 and Dante 2. Before I realized what was happening, Dante 1 and Dante 2 overpowered Tiffany and I. The last thing I remembered was Tiffany slumped to the ground before I was knocked unconscious. When I woke up, Tiffany and I were on a boat, bound and gagged.
Grab her legs!
Aiden nodded to Alexandro. I looked on in horror as Tiffany wiggled and squirmed as they picked her up and tossed her overboard. "No!" I screamed through my gag. Tears rolled down my face. Tiffany was dead and it was my fault.
What's the plan for this one?
Aiden kicked me as Alexandro started the engine of the boat.
We have to stick to the plan. Chuck wants his money.
Once we docked, I was blindfolded and taken to another location. When the blindfold was removed, I was in a dungeon-like room that smelled horrid. There was a hole in the ground for a toilet and a small bench on the corner. I was shackled. Alexandro told me to call my parents and tell them that we were going to elope, and I needed to sound happy. That was the hardest 2 minutes of my life. I didn't know if after that phone call I'd ever see or hear my parents' voices again. My parents gave us their blessing, and I told them I'd be off the grid for the next 3 months, and they shouldn't worry about me. I promised them that they would hear from me as soon as I returned. Alexandro threatened me to put on a wedding dress, and pictures were posted on my social media page. After Aiden forged our marriage certificate, a month later they faked my death. They said I died in a boating accident after Alexandro and I took a private cruise ship to a remote island. Alexandro, because he was my husband, got all my assets. After 6 months of being a prisoner, I was able to escape after Aiden accidentally left my dungeon door unlocked. It took me 3 days before I arrived at my parents' house.
Sonia?
Mom screamed as she hugged me and brought me inside. Dad ran into the room.
Margaret, what did you say?
He looked at Mom before he realized I was in the room. My parents took me to a private doctor who ran some tests on me. They never revealed to the doctor my true identity. The doctor recommended that I get some rest and placed me on a strict diet until I was able to consume foods as I should. About 2 weeks after my escape, my parents paid not only for me to have plastic surgery, but they also had a full makeover. We also legally changed our names. They knew that the twins were probably still looking for me, and they weren't about to lose me twice. After we healed from the plastic surgery, we moved to another country and hoped to start a new life. But what do you do when you try to start a new life? But your old life comes back to haunt you. While shopping at a store, I saw Tiffany assisting a customer. Yes, you heard right. How could this even be possible? I couldn't let this pass up. I hired a young lady, Amanda, to befriend Tiffany. I told her what to say and how to act. We also changed her name to Stephanie. Once Amanda built a relationship with Tiffany, I told her to invite her to the club. We wired Amanda and sent 2 private security guards to look after her just in case something went wrong. While at the club, Alexandro and Aiden showed up.
Hey, Stephanie. I'd like you to meet my 2 brothers, Aiden and Alexandro.
My jaw dropped. Her brothers? Tiffany explained that her father had an affair with his secretary who died during childbirth. But unlike her brothers, she took her mother's last name, not her father's. Further into the night, I found out that I was a target the first week Tiffany met me at the mall, and I played right into her hand. I hired a private investigator to follow Mr. Finley for about 2 weeks before I made my move. Mr. Finley was an older, handsome version of his sons. I knew I had to play this carefully to pull this off. Did I feel bad for involving Mr. Finley in this mess? Maybe just a little, but that didn't stop me from doing it. On Friday afternoons, Mr. Finley visited art galleries. I made sure that I was at the last art gallery he visited that afternoon. I walked up to him as he stared at one of the photos. "Have you figured out what it is yet?" Mr. Finley smiled at me.
Not yet. Do you have any ideas?
He smiled. "It looks like a giraffe I drew when I was 5. And when I asked Mom what it was, she told me it was a dog." Mr. Finley laughed heartily. We moved from picture to picture, and by the end of the night, we were having a late-night drink at Mariano's, one of the most expensive restaurants in the city. It wasn't long before I won over Mr. Finley's heart, or should I say, Giovanni. After 3 months, Giovanni and I eloped. One lesson I learned from before: always have backup and cameras. Without telling Giovanni, I placed tiny cameras around the house, and I paid a company to keep tabs on my stepchildren. I got word that they planned to kidnap me. On the night of the kidnapping, I noticed when they entered the house, and I pressed my alarm, which alerted the police. I sat in the office and waited for them to barge in. "What do you want?" I raised my hands in the air. Alexandro, Aiden, and Tiffany all wore black masks and black clothing.
We just want to kidnap you for a few days. Your husband will pay a hefty sum to return you unharmed,
Tiffany said.
Let's just grab her and get her out of here.
Alexandro said impatiently. Tiffany walked behind the table and grabbed my arms while Aiden kept the gun on me. Just then, the office door opened. It was Giovanni.
What in the world is going on here?
Giovanni looked around the room.
Sir, stay right there.
Aiden tried to disguise his voice.
Aiden, is that you?
Giovanni grabbed the mask off the person closest to him. It was Alexandro. Distracted, I slapped the gun from Aiden's hand and it fell to the floor. Tiffany, Aiden, and I scrambled to retrieve the gun. In the scuffle, the gun went off twice. Everyone froze. Giovanni groaned and his knees buckled. While Alexandro held his side, we all looked at where the shot came from. Tiffany pulled off her mask. Her eyes were wide with fear as she dropped the gun from her hand. Tiffany and I ran to Giovanni's side while Aiden ran to aid his brother.
Tiffany, we have to go.
Aiden tried to grab Tiffany's hand as he supported Alexandro with his other arm.
Dad!
Tiffany screamed.
Fine.
Aiden retorted and left the room with Alexandro. A few seconds after they left the room, I heard sirens and police officers barge into the room. Giovanni was rushed to the hospital, and Tiffany was placed in handcuffs. The police questioned me at the hospital while Giovanni was in surgery. So, how did my story end? Giovanni died, and I now have a net worth of $100 million. Tiffany, Aiden, and Alexandro spent consecutive life sentences in prison for breaking and entering, attempted kidnapping, attempted murder, and aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. After Giovanni's death, I opened a foundation in remembrance of him to help people who needed financial assistance. It's not a fairy tale ending. However, it was the ending that I deserved.
I was having a bad morning. First, the power was cut while I was taking a shower. Then my car wouldn't start, and now here I stood, waiting for whoever lived in this huge mansion to open the gate and let me in so I could clean the 1,000 rooms they probably never used.
Hello, name please?
A man's voice came over the gate's intercom system. Even his voice sounded rich. I rolled my eyes. Jenny from Sparkly Home Services, I said in my practiced professional voice.
Oh yeah, sorry I kept you waiting. I forgot you were coming today. Please, come in.
The gate made a buzzing sound and swung open. I picked up my cleaning supplies and walked up the ridiculously long driveway. I rang the doorbell and had to wait again for His Royal Highness to get off his throne and come open the door for me. If it wasn't for the fear of getting fired, I'd give him a piece of my mind. I was so angry at him for... The door opened and all my anger evaporated. Standing in front of me was the most handsome man I'd ever seen.
Hey, sorry again. I was on an important international call and I couldn't excuse myself from it. I'm Andy.
I couldn't see my face, but I was sure I was blushing. It's, okay, I'm here to clean you. I mean your house. Have you ever been so embarrassed you wished the earth would open up and swallow you? That was me standing awkwardly in front of Andy. Want to know what his reaction was? Please like this video and subscribe to our channel. Also, please save me by hitting the notification bell.
Hey, are you feeling all right?
Andy reached out a hand to touch my forehead, but I took a step back so fast I tripped and fell on my butt.
Oh no. Are you hurt?
He offered me his hand, but I didn't take it. I'm okay, I can get up myself. I tried to stand up, but pain shot through my ankle. Ouch! I screamed as I fell awkwardly back to the ground. The amused look on Andy's face was replaced by concern.
I think you twisted your ankle. Let me help.
He carefully lifted me and carried me into the house. I just need to put some ice on it, then I can start cleaning.
What? There's no way you'll be able to work.
If I don't, then I'll be in trouble at work. I can't afford to... My thoughts went back to the cold shower I took that morning, and my car that needed a trip to the mechanic. I needed to work.
I'll just tell your boss that you cleaned. The place is not that dirty anyway. You need the day off.
Andy was not only handsome, he was kind, too. That's very nice of you, thanks. I better get going. You have a lovely home, by the way.
Thank you. How about I drive you?
You don't have to do that.
I want to. Come on, let's get your stuff and go.
We loaded my cleaning supplies in Andy's fancy car, then drove out of his compound.
Where do you live?
I gave him my address. My mom, brother, and I lived in a part of town very different from Andy's. Our apartment block was old, with paint peeling from the walls and water leaking from most pipes. Thanks for everything you've done for me today. As soon as my ankle is better, I'll come and clean for free. We were sitting in Andy's car parked outside our apartment. I'd have invited him in, but I was embarrassed he'd see how bad our living conditions were.
Jenny, could I get your number? Maybe we could go out to dinner?
My heart started drumming so loud I was afraid he could hear it. Yeah, sure. He handed me a pen and a piece of paper, and I wrote down my number. A few days went by, but Andy never called or texted. Every time my phone rang, I jumped hoping it was him. After almost 1 week, I gave up and decided to forget about him. However, one morning, a call came in from a new number. It was Andy. He apologized for taking a long time to call me, saying he'd been out of town on a business trip.
Are you free tonight?
Yes, I am, I said eagerly.
How about I buy you dinner?
I removed my phone from my ear and took a deep breath to calm myself. Dinner sounds lovely.
Great, I'll come by at around 7 p.m. See you then.
The rest of my day was a blur. I borrowed some money from Mom and went shopping. I bought a beautiful dinner dress, then got my nails and hair done. I was going to pay her back as soon as I cashed my paycheck, which I'd collected that morning. I was so nervous I'd barely eaten anything all day.
Where's your fancy boyfriend taking you?
My younger brother Alex, who was home from college, asked. He's not my boyfriend.
But you've been smiling all day like a fool. I even saw you walk into a door because you forgot it was there.
Alex was annoying, but I loved him. I turned down going to college so he could go. Mom could only afford to pay for one of us. My phone rang and I almost dropped it. He's here. My palms were sweaty and I had to take several deep breaths before opening the door.
Wow, you look gorgeous.
Thanks. You look great in a suit. Andy drove us to a 5-star restaurant I knew very well because I went there often to clean. I'd never walked through the main entrance though. My colleagues and I always came and went through the service entrance.
Hello, I'm Mario. I'll be your server this evening.
As he was handing me the restaurant menu, Mario's eyes widened with recognition. He lived across the hall from us, and he was Alex's best friend. I took a single look at the menu and lost my appetite. Some of the dishes cost more than our rent.
Are you ready to order?
Wow, everything looks so...
Delicious, I know.
I was going to say expensive. After a few minutes of fiddling with the menu, I ordered a simple spaghetti dish that was still ridiculously priced. Andy, on the other hand, did not hold back. He ordered steak with a side of seafood and a bottle of wine. I couldn't help but laugh.
What's funny?
I'm sorry, but your order is enough to feed a small country.
I couldn't resist. Everything here is so good.
The rest of the evening was perfect. Andy laughed at all of my jokes, even the lame ones. At the beginning of our evening, Mario brought our bill. Andy looked at it, then reached for his wallet from his trouser pocket. He stood up abruptly and checked his back pockets.
This can't be happening.
Andy, what's wrong?
My wallet. I can't find it.
Maybe you dropped it in the car?
Probably. Wait here. I'll be right back.
He quickly walked out. Mario and I waited in awkward silence. After a few minutes, Andy was back. Did you find it?
No, I probably dropped it at the gas station. I went there before picking you up.
So what do we do now? I didn't have enough money to cover our huge bill. People sitting at other tables were starting to stare at us.
I can take you to the manager's office. She will know what to do.
No need for that. I have something that will cover our bill. I reached into my purse and handed Mario the paycheck I'd collected that morning.
What's this?
It's my paycheck for the week. You have my permission to cash it. Andy quickly stepped forward.
Oh, no, I couldn't ask you to do that.
It's okay. We should leave now.
I promise I'll pay you back as soon as I get to an ATM machine.
Please don't. Consider this my treat.
Seriously? Oh, you're the best. I was so embarrassed in there.
As we walked out of the restaurant, I wondered how I was going to cover my bills and expenses until my next paycheck. Also, how was I going to pay Mom back? A few days passed and Andy still hadn't found his wallet. He said he was waiting for a new credit and ATM card from his bank. During the week, we went out for a movie and a few lunches, all on me. Whenever we ordered takeout at his house, I paid. He told me to keep all the receipts so he could write me one big check for all of the expenses I was covering. I had to pick up extra shifts at work to fill the huge dent left by our dinner bill and our other dates.
I'll actually pay you twice the amount, so don't worry, okay? You're the perfect girlfriend.
He said one evening as we watched TV at his house. That night, I went home on cloud 9. Andy had called me his girlfriend.
What's got you so happy?
Alex asked when he saw me smiling and texting. If I was a cartoon character, I would have heart emojis swirling in my eyes. Nothing. Alex grabbed my phone and looked at my texts.
You're still seeing this loser? Did he ever pay you back?
No, but he will soon.
I can't believe you. You know Mario told me something about him, but I didn't want to upset you, so I kept it to myself.
What did he tell you?
The restaurant he works at was catering some rich guy's birthday party 2 days ago. Mario saw Andy there.
So he's probably friends with the host.
Jenny, he was there with a girl.
You're lying, or Mario doesn't know what he saw. Or maybe she was his sister.
Do you hear yourself? You're making excuses for him just like you've been doing. He's using you, Jenny.
Get out of my room! I couldn't listen to his ridiculous accusations anymore. Andy was perfect. I decided not to ask Andy about what Alex told me. But after a few days of wondering, I couldn't keep it to myself anymore, so I asked him if it was true. He denied ever being at the party Mario mentioned. That was a week ago. He'd driven me home later that night, and I hadn't heard from him since. I needed to do something. After work, I went to his house. I entered the code he gave me at the gate and walked into the compound. When I rang the doorbell, I closed my eyes and hoped he was home. When the door opened, I didn't wait for him to speak. Andy, I'm sorry. I stopped mid-sentence because the person standing there was not Andy. It was an elderly lady with graying hair and a walking stick. When she saw me, she took a step back.
How did you get past our gate? Barry? Get out here, I think we're getting robbed.
What? Wait, ma'am, I'm not a robber. I'm Andy's girlfriend. Is he home? The lady was probably his grandma or something. How sweet of him to let her visit him. My boyfriend was just so thoughtful.
Young lady, who is Andy?
An equally elderly man asked as he joined the lady. Andy, your grandson, he probably mentioned me. I'm Jenny. They looked at each other confused. I searched for a photo of Andy on my phone and showed it to them.
Oh, you mean Andrew, the house sitter.
Their faces lit up with recognition.
He left as soon as we returned from our trip overseas. He's a lovely young man. He took such good care of our house.
He did what now? No, it couldn't be. The lady must have sensed my distress because she invited me in and sat me down. The first thing I noticed was that the huge portrait of Andy normally hanging on one of the living room walls was gone. So Andy does not own this house?
I'm afraid not, dear. Andy was our house sitter. We hired him from a company called Sparkly Home Services.
Oh my god, we worked for the same company? I was going to be sick.
Take a deep breath, dear.
The lady put her hand on my shoulder and I started sobbing. How could I have been so foolish? All right, guys, let me grab some tissues. I'll be right back. After I composed myself, I told them everything starting from the first day I met Andy at their house. Mr. and Mrs. Barry were shocked by my story. I thanked them for listening and was about to leave when Mrs. Barry stopped me.
I have an idea. How about we give Andy a taste of his own medicine?
How do we do that?
Leave that to me. Just be here tomorrow at 10 a.m.
Mrs. Barry smiled.
Oh boy, I know that smile. She's about to start trouble.
Mr. Barry laughed. The next day, I went to the Barrys' home like we agreed.
All right, Jenny. Are you ready?
Nervous, but yes, I'm ready.
Good, because he's walking to the front door now.
Mrs. Barry said as she stood by the window facing the gate. I bet you're wondering what we're up to. Well, earlier that morning, Mrs. Barry called Sparkly Home Services and told them that she needed to hire Andy again. He immediately accepted the job. When he rang the doorbell, my heart started to pound.
Come right in, Andrew.
Thanks, Mrs. Barry. My supervisor said you...
Hi, Andrew. It's nice to finally meet the real you, I said, stepping forward so he could see me. His eyes widened.
Jenny, I can explain.
Save it. I'm not in the mood for any more of your lies. I just wanted to see the look on your face when you saw me.
We are very disappointed in you, Andrew. We trusted you with our home and our car, and you used them to lie to Miss Jenny.
But I'm...
Andy took a step back, and another, then guess what he did? He ran away like a crazy person. The Barrys lodged a complaint against Andy, and he got fired immediately. I never heard from him again. Despite my regret about letting Andy fool me, it was a blessing in disguise because the Barrys hired me to cook and clean for them every day. Their pay was so much better. Within a few months, I was able to move us from our old apartment into a much better one. I was also able to pay for my remaining online classes. Above all, I learned my lesson.
I waited in the corner of the room, nervous with excitement. I knew that any minute now my best friend Mark would come walking into the classroom. I grinned to myself as I thought about what was about to happen. I had everything set up ready. The bucket was balanced precariously on the edge of the door. The door opened. I could tell as soon as Mark saw me that he knew what was about to happen. But it was too late to do anything about it. The bucket came tumbling down, spilling its contents on top of Mark's head. I was expecting Mark to burst out laughing as he usually did whenever I pranked him. But instead, he let out a guttural scream that pierced deep inside my body. Ah! I suddenly stopped laughing as Mark collapsed on the floor. If you think this is shocking, you will be blown away when you see what happens at the end of this video. I had always been a prankster, and Mark knew it. He was often the victim of my pranks. This was just a typical one for his birthday. It was my way of showing him that I loved him. But somehow, this had all gone wrong. Mark was lying on the floor screaming out in pain. What is it? What's the matter?
My eyes! My eyes!
What's wrong with your eyes?
They're burning!
Someone must have called for the nurse because suddenly I felt her beside me.
Here, let me take a look at him.
I moved out of the way and watched as she started bathing his face with cold water. I stood there in a daze. How could this have happened? There was only water in the bucket. How could he be in so much pain?
You will need to go to the hospital to get your face and eyes checked out.
I'm going with him. The nurse called for an ambulance. As we drove to the hospital, I sat there staring at Mark. I felt terrible. I'm so sorry, Mark. But he didn't even answer me. He just lay there, holding his hands over his eyes. Then we got to the hospital and the doctors took him away to be examined. I went and sat down in the waiting room. After about half an hour, the doctor came out to me. He looked very serious.
It was bleach in that bucket, not water. I'm afraid your friend is now blind.
What? No, it must be a mistake. I know I put water in the bucket.
It's definitely no mistake, I can assure you.
I was distraught. I can't believe it. How can it have gone so wrong? I feel awful. Can I see him?
Yes, but just for a few minutes. He needs to rest.
I followed the doctor as he led me to Mark's room. I had no idea what I was going to say to Mark. When I walked into his room, I was shocked to see him laid on the bed, bandages covering his eyes. Oh, Mark, I'm so sorry. I never meant for this to happen. I have no idea how the bleach got into the bucket. I only meant to give you a soaking.
It's okay, Jason. I know it was just one of your pranks. I'm not mad at you.
But you're blind now. How can you ever forgive me?
I don't want any fuss. It is what it is. Look, I'm feeling a bit tired now. Would you mind letting me sleep?
No, of course not. I'll come to visit you again tomorrow.
Okay.
I walked out of the room and down the corridor. I was in such a daze I didn't notice Mark's parents walking towards me.
What have you done to my son?
I'm sorry. I didn't mean it.
You and your stupid pranks. You're not going to get away with this. We are going to press charges.
I burst into tears and ran out of the hospital. I had never felt so bad in all of my life. Mark's parents were true to their words. They went to the police and pressed charges. I was taken to court and sentenced to 5 years in prison. When I heard the judge's words, I was distraught. I looked over at my mom and dad sitting in the gallery. Their faces looked so sad. At that moment, I felt as though my life was over. But it wasn't. My first day in the prison was awful. I was scared to death. Everyone just stared at me as if they were weighing up the new guy. Nobody smiled at me. Nobody said hello. I'm gonna hate it here. But then I met Frank. He was sitting alone at a table, so I went over to him. Mind if I join you?
If you want.
Frank was a tough guy. He had also just got into prison and had been sentenced to 5 years too. We began chatting, and it wasn't long before we realized that we actually really liked each other. And once I became friends with Frank, the other prisoners had a new respect for me. Frank didn't take any nonsense from anyone, and he protected me too. The other prisoners were scared of upsetting me because they knew that if Frank found out, they would be in big trouble. It wasn't long before I was being treated like a prince. People bowed down to me everywhere I went. I got the best bed in the prison, and at mealtimes, the servers always made sure I got extra food. You'll probably think this is weird, but I actually liked being in prison. It was a great feeling, so powerful. We were all given different chores to do, but I never did mine. I always got someone else to do them for me. Hey, you.
Yes, Jason, what is it?
It's my turn to clean the toilets today, but I don't feel like doing it, so you're gonna do it for me, aren't you?
Oh, yes. Yes, of course.
And make sure you do a good job. I don't want the guards thinking I'm slacking.
No problem. I'll make sure they shine.
I laughed to myself as I watched the prisoner run off in the direction of the toilets. As the weeks went by, my life got better and better. I spent all of my time either laying in bed, chatting with Frank, or eating. But then one day, it all changed. I was laying on my bed when a guard came into my cell.
Come with me. You have a telephone call.
I was shocked. We only had calls once a week, and I had already spoken to my parents at the weekend. Wonder who can be calling me. I picked up the telephone.
Jason?
Mom, is everything okay? It's not Dad, is it?
No, your dad's fine. I've got some fantastic news.
What?
You're going to be let out.
What? How come?
The police were suspicious about what happened with Mark. They saw how upset you were, and they knew that you really loved him. They did some more investigating, and they found out that Mark had been lying all along.
What? Are you serious?
Yes! The blindness, the bleach, it was all fake.
I was so confused.
You can come home. They're going to let you out straight away. We can't wait to see you.
I put the phone down and looked at the guard in shock.
Go and get your things packed up, and you're free to go.
I packed up my bag and went to find Frank. I'm being let out. Mark was lying about being blind. I didn't do anything to him.
I'm so happy for you. I'll see you in a few years when I get out.
I gave Frank a hug and said goodbye. You're probably thinking that I'd be so happy to get out, but it was actually bittersweet. I was gonna miss Frank so much. The guard opened the door and let me out onto the street outside. I was about to set off down the road when a police van pulled up. They opened the door and someone stepped out onto the pavement. It was Mark, and he was in handcuffs. Mark! He looked towards me. Why? Why did you lie?
Because I was sick and tired of you pranking me all the time, I wanted you to get a taste of your own medicine. I saw you putting the bucket of water on top of the door, so when you weren't looking, I switched the water for bleach. Then I put contacts in my eyes to protect them.
But the doctor told me you were blind.
Oh, I just faked that. I told the doctors that I couldn't see anything at all.
But how could you let your parents press charges? How could you let me go to prison?
I was happy when you went to prison. I was finally free of you.
When he said that, it felt like a knife had been plunged into my heart. I felt so sad. I thought we were best friends, but now I've made a true best friend, Frank. He's in prison, and now you'll be joining him. I'm going to make sure Frank knows all about what you've done to me. Mark looked really scared. Don't judge me. Prison can change you, and prison turned me into a prince. It was hard going back to school and having to readjust my life. I'd gotten used to being treated like a prince, and now I was a nobody again. I couldn't control the other kids like I'd been able to control the other prisoners. I couldn't get them to do things for me, and I didn't get any extra perks. So that's why I decided that I had to find a way to go back to prison. I knew that I had to come up with a plan to get myself arrested again. It didn't need to be anything too serious, just the fact that I was a former prisoner would get me put away, even for a minor offense. I waited outside school until everyone had left. Once the coast was clear, I went back into school and started vandalizing one of the classrooms. I made sure that I made plenty of noise so the caretaker would hear me. It wasn't long before I heard the sound of police sirens coming towards the school.
You're under arrest.
The police officer put the handcuffs on me.
You'll be going to prison for doing this.
I smiled to myself as the policeman led me away. I couldn't have been happier. As soon as I got in prison, I went to find Frank. I'm back.
Didn't take you long.
Where's Mark? Frank pointed to the other side of the room.
Over there. He's the new prince around here.
My face fell when I heard Frank's words. Then my shock turned to anger. No way is he taking over my position here. I'll show him. I went storming over to Mark.
Jason, what are you doing back here?
It doesn't matter what I'm doing here. What matters is that I'm back, and I'm taking back my title as the prince of the prison.
Oh, I don't think so, Jason. I'm the prince now. Everyone has forgotten about you.
We'll see. Watch your back. Over the next few days, Mark and I did whatever we could to get one over on the other one. Even though Mark had some loyal followers, he didn't have the backing of Frank. I began to get a few of the prisoners to do things for me, but it wasn't enough. I needed to rule everybody like I had before. So I decided to make a speech to the whole of the prison. I waited until everyone was in the dining hall for dinner and I stood up on a chair. Quiet, quiet. Slowly, the noise of chatter started to die down. There can only be one prince in this prison. You will all have to choose between Mark and me. You all know me. You know that I will protect you and treat you with respect if you choose me as your prince. Mark, however, doesn't know how to treat people well. He proved that with what he did to me. Only a cruel person would set their own best friend up and frame them for something they didn't do. He will only treat you with cruelty. That is the only way he knows how to get what he wants. I'm your prince. Choose me. I looked around the room to see what their reaction would be. The prisoners were silent for a few seconds, but then, one by one, they all started standing up and cheering.
Jason! 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 Jason!
It wasn't long before the whole prison had joined in the chanting. I looked at Mark and smiled. I guess they've made their choice. So now life is back to normal in the prison. I am the prince and life couldn't be better. Well, actually it could. It would be perfect if Frank and I were both out of prison. So that's why we're making plans now. We've decided that when we get out of here, in another 4 years, we're going to open up our own business together. We're going to run a bodyguard service. I'm sure you don't need to ask who's going to be the president, or rather, the prince of the company.